Last July, I nearly passed out from heat exhaustion, trying to hold a heavy hose over my tomatoes in the blazing midday sun. But this summer, thanks to a tiny hidden hole drilled into the bottom of my wicking tub, I can leave to visit my grandkids for 10 days straight, and the garden waters itself perfectly. However, there is one critical mistake most people make when building this system that will starve your roots of oxygen on the very first day. Hello, I'm Alex. I'm 62, and last year I almost collapsed over my tomatoes. Not from a heart attack, from sheer exhaustion, wrestling a heavy hose under the midday sun. I asked myself one question that day. Why am I trading my spine for a basket of tomatoes? That question led me to this, a system that now waters itself for 10 days straight while I visit my grandkids. But before you build one, there is one mistake that will destroy your entire garden on day one. Let me show you what it is. I used to think that drenching the soil from above until the surface was completely soaked was the only way to help plants thrive. But watching the old-growth forests, I realized I was wrong. In the forest, plants never have to endure rushed buckets of water pouring from the sky. They survive through a quiet mechanism we call capillary action. Imagine the microchannels in the soil acting like millions of microscopic straws, patiently pulling water upward against gravity from the deep layers to nourish the root system. This is the very core principle of the wicking tub. When we place a barrier at the bottom of the container to create a separate water reservoir, we are no longer just watering plants. We are establishing a self-sustaining nourishment system for the earth. The soil pulls up exactly the amount of moisture it needs, no more, no less. Now, pause for a second. Look at your current garden setup. Are you still watering from the top? If yes, you are not watering plants. You are training them to be lazy. And lazy roots mean weak plants. Plant roots, which are much smarter than we give them credit for, will naturally reach down into that cool, damp layer to slowly sip the nutrients. Have you ever wondered why plants in traditional pots often wilt on peak summer days? It is because the mycorrhizal fungi, the precious symbiotic network that helps plants absorb minerals, goes into shock from sudden moisture fluctuations. One moment it is completely waterlogged, the next it is dry as a desert. With this system, the moisture remains perfectly stable, and that stability is the key for the fungal network to grow enduringly, bringing true vitality from the very core of the soil. The setup process is very simple. We need a sturdy barrier, a wicking layer of material to draw the water, and most importantly, a space for the roots to breathe. Remember, roots need oxygen just as much as they need water. If you pack it too tightly, you create an oxygen-deprived mud pit. And that is when roots begin to decline instead of grow. We are not making a stagnant puddle. We are building an underground reservoir to nurture life. But here is something I must say. Many of my friends eagerly built these wicking tubs at home. They filled the water reservoir, happily thinking they had created a lasting oasis for the summer. But just 2 weeks later, their tomato plants began to turn yellow and wilt. And when they dug into the soil, they found the roots had turned dark and soft, giving off an unpleasant, swampy odor. They had unknowingly turned their garden into a suffocating swamp. Here is a quick test. Go outside and smell the bottom of your planters. If you catch even a hint of rotten eggs, your garden is already declining from the bottom up. The root cause of this problem lies in forgetting a basic law of physics regarding a plant's need to breathe. Plant roots, if completely submerged in deep, stagnant water for too long, will quickly consume the little oxygen dissolved in that water. Once the oxygen is depleted, the environment instantly turns oxygen poor. That is when harmful bacteria thrive, breaking down organic matter and releasing gases that damage root tissue. That swampy smell you notice is simply the sign of an unhealthy environment at the bottom of your container. So how do we prevent this permanently? The secret lies in one precise number, 3.5 inches. This is not a random number. It is the golden boundary drawn from years of observing plant physiology. When you are preparing to create the water reservoir at the bottom of your food-grade plastic tub, use a tape measure and carefully mark exactly 3.5 inches from the base. At that exact mark, we are going to drill an overflow hole. This drilled hole acts as a perfect, foolproof system. No matter how much water you pour in, or how heavily a sudden summer thunderstorm pours down, the water level inside the tub will absolutely never rise above this 3.5-inch line. Any excess water will instantly weep out through the overflow hole. Because of this simple limit, we ensure there is always an invisible gap maintained between the water's surface and the soil layer above it. This gap is the lung of the system. It allows air to slip in, providing an abundant supply of oxygen for the roots to breathe. When those tender young roots pierce through the barrier and touch this space, they will not drown. There is no harmful gas, no root decline, only a damp, fresh environment brimming with vitality. With just one tiny drill hole, you have established an automatic guard, silently protecting the life of your entire garden without the need for a single complicated electronic sensor. A quick note here. I am not a doctor or a physical therapist. What I am about to share about back pain and spine health comes purely from my own experience. If you have a serious spinal condition, please talk to your healthcare provider before making any changes to your gardening set. Now let me speak to something we often silently endure: physical exhaustion in the garden. In our younger years, we could easily squat for hours to pull weeds or bend over to press tiny seeds into compacted earth. But as we step into our 50s and 60s, every deep bend is a harsh reminder from our spine, especially the lower back, where those delicate vertebrae have to bear the entire weight of our upper body in awkward postures. Not to mention the knee cartilage quietly wearing away as the years go by. If we continue to maintain garden beds flat against the ground, we unintentionally turn our garden into a grueling physical workout rather than a sanctuary for healing our soul. That is why the second core principle of the Wicking tub does not lie in the underground water table, but in its height. I call it the height of understanding. Instead of placing the plastic tubs directly on the brick patio or the bare ground, I elevate them on a sturdy base. You can use rough cinder blocks or repurpose some old wooden pallets into a simple shelf. The ideal height, from my experience, is about 18 to 20 inches from the ground to the bottom of the tub. Why this specific 18-inch mark? Because that is the standard height of an ordinary wooden garden stool. When you pull a stool out to the porch and sit down to relax, the surface of the Wicking tub will sit perfectly right at your hip level. And as those tomatoes, peppers, or lettuce plants begin to grow taller, the most vibrant clusters of fruit will appear right before your eyes. You no longer have to overreach. You no longer have to endure the tiring ache of a bent back or kneel on ground mixed with sharp gravel. Every motion of pruning away yellowed leaves or carefully picking a perfectly ripe tomato happens in a completely relaxed posture. Your shoulders naturally drop. Your spine gets to rest, leaning slightly back. My neighbor saw me doing this and laughed. "You're putting your plants on a throne," he said. 3 weeks later, he was at my door asking me to build one for his wife's bad back. Only when the body is no longer bothered by aches and pains can your mind become truly still enough to feel the most delicate movements of the garden. You will notice the soft rustle of a ladybug crawling across a leaf or a shift in the damp breeze brushing by. By raising the planters to eye level, we are not just saving our own joints. We are pulling nature closer to the rhythm of our heart, slowly, peacefully, without spending a single ounce of unnecessary effort. Once you have this system set up, a quiet miracle takes place right on the surface of the soil. Because every drop of water is drawn upward from the bottom, the top 2 inches of soil will always remain dry and loose. This is not just physics. This is nature's strongest shield. This dry soil layer completely breaks the life cycle of pesky fungus gnats, as they no longer have a damp, swampy puddle to lay their eggs. Blight spores, which usually splash up from wet soil onto the leaves every time we water with a hose, now lose their environment to spread. Your tomato plants will grow strong with completely dry, clean leaves. More than that, I always think about the tiny creatures that visit the garden every day. The hard-working honeybees or the fragile butterflies will never have to face the danger of drowning in exposed puddles of water like they often do with traditional plant pots. They can safely land on the dry mulch to rest. And if you have a curious dog or a cat that loves to explore like mine does, you can rest perfectly easy. The irrigation water, even if you mix in a bit of worm-casting tea or a concentrated organic fertilizer, is safely hidden, locked away under the false bottom. No more dirty, exposed water saucers sitting under pots, endangering pets or breeding mosquitoes. It is a perfect balance, protecting everything, from the microorganisms deep below to the tiny heartbeats above ground. And the greatest reward for respecting this natural rhythm, it is your own freedom. Do you remember the fill tube we installed? You simply pour water into it until you see a few drops weep from that 3.5-inch overflow hole. That is it. You cap it, and the system shifts into a self-sustaining mode. It holds enough reserves for the plant to take care of itself through 10 days of scorching heat. You can literally lock the garden gate, travel to visit your grandchildren, and when you return, the leaves will still be reaching up, plump and at peace, as if you had never left. Nature always has its own rhythmic way of working. Saving our strength does not mean we are being lazy with our garden. It is how we love the land more enduringly, respecting the limits of our own bodies, so we can preserve this green legacy for many summers to come. So let me ask you something. Be honest with me. Have you ever hidden your back pain from your family just so you could keep your garden going? I did that for 2 summers before I finally admitted I needed a change. Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. Today, we saved our knees and our spines from the tomato pots, But what if you have a massive herb patch or a large area for growing lettuce? You cannot sit there and build dozens of these tubs. Do not rush out to buy those expensive wooden frames from the store. In our next journal entry, I will share how I lifted an entire large garden bed up to waist height. A space I call the garden bed you can harvest sitting down. A place where you can sow seeds and cut greens without ever having to bend your back. Not even once. Thank you for walking through the garden with me today.